the entertaining Talking Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, we're going to talk about our arch rival, the Philadelphia Eagles, as big news has dropped that Carson Wentz has officially been traded. If you notice any new changes to the channel, I do have an official sponsor. I just want to say thank you to all you guys. I'm going to go in more extensive detail in my next video. Going to have another Giants video up where I talk about Allen Robinson, Kenny Golladay. The news has come out about them being franchise tagged. And I'll talk about how that may actually, in my opinion, increase the probability of the New York Giants bringing in either one of those wide receivers, even though I may not necessarily think it's very likely. But I'll talk about that later today and what I think the New York Giants may do at the wide receiver position if they decide to attack it in free agency. But I wanted to go over the big news of the day, something like I said we've all been waiting for. The Philadelphia Eagles have officially traded Carson Wentz. I'm going to get into the details of the trade, and then I'll talk about how it could potentially affect this year's draft pick for the Eagles, which may in turn potentially affect the New York Giants. What we do at number 11, and of course you always want to keep up with your rivals in the NFC, but before I even get into the details of the trade, the first thing I'm going to say, what this signifies for the Eagles, at least at this point in time with Sirianni coming aboard, I think the Eagles have just entered full rebuild mode. Of course, Jalen Hurts, as of now, is the starter for the Philadelphia Eagles. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to continue to be the case going into the year. Yeah, Jalen Hurts definitely displayed some promise. You don't know how Sirianni feels about him, and he definitely didn't look very good in that last game. Not to mention, he doesn't go against the cap at all. So it's not like that prevents the Eagles from further trying to bring in another quarterback if they can via the draft, being that they're not paying Hurts much to begin with, and he wasn't thought to be this unbelievable quarterback prospect coming out of college. But Wentz now being traded, well, that ends an era in Philadelphia, something that looked very promising in 2017 when they won the Super Bowl before he went down with the injury. Wentz was arguably, more than likely, the MVP of the first 13 weeks of the NFL regular season before he sustained the injury. And just last year, before last season, rather, 2019, you heard Philadelphia Eagle fans and people in the media saying that he was the top 6-7 quarterback in the league. That he, accomplished all these great statistical accomplishments without a number one wide receiver, how he carried the team on his back. And last year, it was just an absolute disgrace. And I think a lot of that had to do with Doug Peterson. There was a bad relationship there. The Eagles decided to move on from Peterson. But in the end, Wentz, from all reports, was still not happy there. And now he is going to head to the Indianapolis Colts. And here is the tweet from Adam Schefter. Now, of course, the connection there, before I read the tweet, is Frank Reich is the head coach for the Indianapolis Colts. And you look at the Colts now. Frank Reich, of course, is former offensive coordinator back in 2017 when Carson Wentz had his most success, and the Eagles went on to win the Super Bowl, which is why Frank Reich got the job with Indianapolis. But you look at the team that the Indianapolis Colts have now, and now you're bringing a quarterback who had tremendous success with Reich, a guy that I think we all agree has talent, and if you put him in the right situation, which the Colts clearly have, you look at the offensive line they have in comparison to the Eagles, it's night and day based off of last year's offensive line, and Carson Wentz is really set up for success as the quarterback carousel continues to develop this offseason. But here's the tweet from Adam Schefter. Philadelphia has agreed to trade Carson Wentz to the Indianapolis Colts in exchange for a 2021 third-round pick and a conditional 2022 second-round pick that could turn into a first, league sources tell Mortensen. So I'm not 100% sure what that means and how it could turn into a first. Maybe it has something to do with if they, I don't know, because he's already signed. I don't know how it'll work. Maybe it's performance-based. Who knows? Maybe if the Colts win a Super Bowl, advance in the playoffs. Who knows? I'm sure those details will come out. But I think that's pretty fair value. I was laughing at the reports that came out and said that the Eagles may be able to obtain 2 first-round picks. Then you heard that they may be able to obtain 2 seconds. Well, usually the way these trades work, when you get a future pick, it's usually a round behind. That's how they evaluate it. Meaning if you get a first-round pick a year from now, it's kind of looked at as a second-round pick. So they got a third-round pick and a future second as of now, which is kind of like another third. So unless they get a first-round pick out of it, which there's conditions, it's almost like they traded Carson Wentz for 2 third-round picks. And if you're an Eagles fan, to be honest with you, if Wentz wasn't going to be in the future of this team, based on the amount of money that you're going to be paying him, and to my understanding, the Eagles are still going to have to eat up a lot of the money just for this year, kind of like the New York Giants had to do with Odell Beckham, so a lot of it will still go against their cap. You still got to be happy that you were able to get anything for Carson Wentz based off the year that he had, being that the money that he was going to be making. As a Colts fan, I think you have a team now that is equipped to contend for a Super Bowl if Carson Wentz could regain his form. And there's no reason to think in a better environment with the coach that was his offensive coordinator with the Eagles where you got the most out of him, and now you have a great offensive line. You've got young weapons all over the football field, and you didn't have to give up any top draft capital. You give up a third-round pick this year. So the Colts still have their first and second-round pick. They can continue to bring in weapons. They've got young talent over there to begin with. Jonathan Taylor rushed for, I think, over 1,100 yards there. A lot of talent, a lot of young talent on that offense. They have an emerging defense. I think it is the perfect fit for Carson Wentz. You couldn't have asked for a better fit. Maybe the Niners, but with Frank Reich, he had so much success. I think it is a perfect destination for Carson Wentz. And if you're an Eagles fan that's a fan of Wentz, you should be happy because I think he's set up for success. And as an Eagles fan, you couldn't have expected much more. And I think it was clear that you guys were not going to come back together. So I think this was inevitable. And in the end, I think it was about fair value. 2 third-round picks, essentially, a third and a second. But like I said, a year in advance, that's the way it's evaluated. Maybe it'll turn into a first. In terms of how this affects the draft, like I said, I don't think it's a lock that the Eagles are going to look at Jalen Hurts as the future franchise quarterback for that football team. You have 4 talented quarterbacks in this year's draft. The Eagles, more than likely, will be picking at the top of the draft next year, if we're being honest. Their team's in big trouble. But they don't know what that quarterback class is going to look like. You have an opportunity now, if you're the Eagles and Sirianni, starting over, to draft a quarterback of your choosing at number 6 overall. More than likely, one of the top 4 will definitely be there, whether that's Justin Fields, whether that's Zach Wilson, or whether that's Trey Lance. I think we all agree that Trevor Lawrence will be up the board. So I think it definitely increases the probability that the Eagles could potentially take a quarterback. And if that's the case, as a New York Giant fan, if you're a fan that's rooting for one of these weapons to fall down to number 11 at the wide receiver or potentially tight end position with Kyle Pitts, I think this further increases the probability of that happening if the Eagles decide to go out there and get a quarterback. Now, of course, Sirianni, when he took the job, said that they looked at it like they had 2 talented quarterbacks in Hurts and Wentz, but you can only read into that so much, right? You've heard coaches say that before. You heard the Cardinals, when their head coach took the job, said that Josh Rosen was going to be his future quarterback. They fell in love with Kyler Murray, with Kingsbury, thought that he fit the system very well. Sirianni may be looking at one of these quarterbacks in the draft, seeing where they're picking, and not wanting to pass up on that opportunity. After all, the Eagles right now, if you're being honest with yourself as an Eagles fan, you guys are in rebuild mode, and you now have an opportunity to potentially select that new franchise quarterback. Whether or not the Eagles will do it, or whether or not they believe in Hurts, remains to be seen. But just because Hurts is on the team, the guy's making second-round money. I don't think that prevents them from going out there and drafting a quarterback in this year's draft. Of course, that would mean that you drafted a quarterback in the second round last year when you had a guy that you thought was the future franchise quarterback who you just gave a $33 million contract to, and then you would draft a quarterback in the following year. But Wentz is gone. I think that opens up the opportunity for the Eagles to take a quarterback. And as a matter of fact, at this point in time, I would actually lean towards that's what they're probably going to do in this year's draft. Would I be shocked if they don't and they go with Hurts? No. I mean, they invested a second-round pick in him. But even though Howie's still there and he was the guy that selected him, Sirianni was not. And if they're going to work collaboratively, which I would think the Eagles would probably want to do, and Sirianni views a guy like Trey Lance or a guy like Fields as a guy that could really help that offense in the future, I think they're going to go ahead and they're going to do it. We'll have to wait and see what it means, but if you ask me, it gives the New York Giants a better opportunity that one of these wide receivers may drop. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.